I want to be as self-aware about the fact that like I'm also on Blue Sky and therefore in a disgusting media bubble, right? So like
and how
but like my understanding of Donald Trump's cognition, I am not professionally nor philosophically qualified for.
I mean, it's a dark place. We understand.
Yeah, and it's a dark place, but for some reason the grinding just keeps getting louder. So it's
We're in a tremendous place in terms of cognition, folks.
This is Normal Men, a podcast from four men who are clinging desperately to normalcy in an era when that's asking a bit too much. I'm George in Charlotte.
In DC, I'm Proctor Malone.
In outer Florida, I'm low-tax speedrun enjoyer.
And I'm Ed in Boston.
Welcome to Normal Men. This week we are joined by Haydon at haydonmp.bsky.social. He's a stroke researcher and paramedic, and we are going to talk about our big wet president's brain, at least what we can tell about it from the position we're in outside of an MRI machine. So Haydon, welcome to Normal Men, man. Really, really good to have you on. We're also probably going to get some woodworking pervert chat going here at some point.
I was going to apologize that, well, one, that's going to happen, but two, that we were dragging along like a Delta nameplate to get Haydon over here, and oops, now it's politics.
Or like even worse than politics, the intersection of medicine and politics, which is never a place anyone wants to be. So
just ask Chuck Schumer.
Oh God,
we'll
get to him later.
Foreshadowing.
Haydon, welcome to Normal Men, man. Thanks for joining us.
No, thank you. I really appreciate y'all having me. And so I just to say, start by being clear about who I am and so where my lane is. As George said, I'm not a physician, and I'm certainly not the president's doctor. I'm a paramedic who's worked for several years in neurology and stroke research. I've co-authored several peer-reviewed papers on stroke assessment, stroke systems of care, and pre-hospital telemedicine. And to go off of George's mixture of medicine and politics, my graduate work was all on stroke as a public policy problem, which was the most cursed course of study I think I've ever chosen to undertake.
Especially in the current context.
It's more frequently relevant than you'd think, actually. But
Haydon MP doesn't stand for Member of Parliament?
Unfortunately, not yet, though I've offered.
Okay.
So.
In which country?
Whichever will take me. I think Sealand is still on the.
Don't go there. The King of Sealand's a prick.
Well, that's.
Vortex is going to put you on Wales after the show.
So to center our the reason we're having you on, Haydon, is we want to talk about the health status of the president. And again, we will say, we are never going to be able to get a complete picture on this because we don't have his medical records released in full. And there are a number of things that seem to be being done to keep his health out of the limelight, I will maybe say. And so at the same time, there are some signs that perhaps not all is well. So I'm just going to list off some random stuff, and we don't even have to like you may shoot some of this down as irrelevant or whatever. But for instance, bruising on the hands, a droop in the face, having a hard time walking in a straight line, a bunch of weird postural or sort of stuff with language that it just scans odd. So can you walk us through sort of what we're possibly looking at here, or what you think is going on? That might be too broad to start, but hey.
No, it's not too broad to start because I think as I've been thinking about this discussion that we're going to have in the last few days, I came to the conclusion that it's kind of important to section out a couple of what you're seeing there, because I think that there are separate things happening at the same time here. To go off of what you're saying too, my perspective here isn't I know exactly what's going on here because we don't have this chart imaging or whatever. But my perspective from here's how someone with my background would look at these kinds of signs that people are talking about, and like what would you take away from it? So when you mention the bruising on the hand, for instance, just at the abstract level, I don't know how much you can really take away from that one in particular, right? So there are any number of reasons why that somebody being abstract about it, a 79-year-old with a known history of vascular issues would end up having bruising on one upper extremity for a prolonged period of time.
And what are those vascular issues that we know about for sure?
Yeah. So, do you mind if I back up a little bit? I got a little.
Yeah, please.
So let's go through like a timeline of what you can actually see here. So first thing you said in the midsummer, we saw, I think, first thing that came up was the lower extremity edema along with the bruising on the hand, right? Those two things showed up at the same time, or were both rather noticed in public the first time, if we're going to be emphasizing things that you can actually see in public. That's why I don't think that you can really take too much away from the bruising on the hand specifically, because that, to me, at least in my personal experience and observation, that could be anything from an older person slipped, fell, banged their hand, takes a while to heal. It's not really something, it's, again, a normal thing for an older person that can happen to them. It can be a blood draw that is done in one of the superficial veins in the hands. It's uncomfortable and painful there, but the term is it extravasates. The blood exits through the vascular veins there. It can take a long time to heal, and that bruising looks really gross for a pretty prolonged period of time. I think that people saw it because it's gross looking, and people got distracted is not the word. Like in my emergency training, we look at injuries like that and call them distracting injuries, because I think that the thing to take away from there was actually the swollen lower extremities. Those would be, at least in my mind, substantially more concerning with an older person, because that's, I think what they said at the time was a chronic venous insufficiency, which is not the same thing as what you would necessarily call all other vascular disorders, but it still implies like certainly a vascular underlying process there, certainly. And so that was August, right? And so I think then, and correct me if I get any part of this timeline mixed up at all, but then right after that was about when we stopped seeing him in public for a certain period of time, somewhere after that, right? So, and this is partly why I think we're talking about a couple of different parallel but possibly interacting processes, if you want to think about it like that. Because the first moment that I really had where I was like, oh, this is the first real moment that I had that I was concerned about cerebrovascular disease would have been the 9/11 memorial, where the president fell asleep or was certainly somnolent, I think you could say at the time. That might be a little too strong, but he had pretty noticeable facial weakness on his right side. So if you looked at it, like looking on, it looks like it's on the left, but it's his right side. And you can't really fake that necessarily. And so there are a couple of different things that can cause that, but we can maybe talk about that a little bit later. But that's something that is, that struck out to me very, very, very strong. So one of the other things that kind of goes along with that is that you would expect that in cerebrovascular disease or a stroke, for instance, that a lot of those focal deficits that you see, like facial weakness, they tend to improve for the first couple of weeks. You have a lot of the improvement that you're going to make, you make pretty early on, and then that recovery slows down thereafter. Long-term recovery is absolutely possible, and you will be humbled by anybody that you think won't recover. That's one of the core lessons I've always taken away. But it's interesting to me that you can still see that facial weakness, for instance, in the president in multiple instances, even now, right? Like you can see this pretty clearly, especially when he's been traveling, stressed, or tired, which in and of itself is consistent too with cerebrovascular disease, where one way to phrase it is that after an incident like that, after a stroke or something like that, the connections there may be a little fragile. And so excess stress on it can end up reactivating some of those deficits. The term for that is recrudescence, putting those things together.
We saw that just the other day when Trump appeared to be falling asleep in the Oval Office.
Yeah.
That right side facial droop was right back, same place, same appearance.
Right, and that's actually, there's a term for that too. Like it's stereotypical, right? Like those deficit flare-ups. Like when you see them again, what makes it, for instance, like what makes me think that would be reactivation of some sort of like a previous deficit is that it looks the same as it did before, right? It looks similar as it did before, and it waxes and wanes, right? Like that's also pretty consistent with it. You can see it, I think, most clearly, to be fair, in the pictures that I know the Washington Post had out today. That entire article where they had a whole slew of pictures. And you can definitely see the right-sided facial weakness there. But you can also see it, for instance, I've noticed it on a couple of videos when he's done the Air Force, like at Air Force One, where he's been traveling. If you look for it, it'll look like it's a flattening, essentially, right? So like the way to think about facial weakness is that imagine if whatever signal is supposed to be getting from here centrally out here peripherally is just cut off somewhere. And you can see it at the corner of the mouth a little bit. That's a lot more subtle, but but it's still there. And the reason, and I feel confident saying that because you can see it so clearly in the still pictures, for instance, still from the Washington Post there as well.
What does this tell us about where Trump might be right now and where that might be going in terms of his health, or in terms of, to whatever extent we might be able to draw any kind of conclusions about his abilities or about additional risks going forward?
So the way that I would think about it is to abstract away from, and I've tried to be careful about it, is to abstract away from Donald Trump, the president, and thinking about 79-year-old male with a history of chronic venous insufficiency, who has a very high demanding schedule, who doesn't sleep well, and has, like, again, the things that we can observe from that and what we would expect from that. And the answer is that you kind of think about it from, three general approaches. The first is that he had a discrete, singular event that was well managed, and there isn't actually all that much more to say about it. This is probably the thing that would make me the least popular on Blue Sky to say, but a perfectly well managed minor stroke is not disqualifying for the office of the presidency. And quite frankly, it's really important to understand that when it comes to cerebrovascular disease, close monitoring and extremely close control of secondary risk factors like high blood pressure, cardiac arrhythmias, and some of these other ones, that's the thing that prevents you from having a second stroke. That's what prevents you from having another event like that. The president of the United States is literally, or quite possibly literally, the most closely monitored person on the planet, right? And so from that perspective, even if I, for instance, think that there is evidence of cerebrovascular disease here, without access to more medical records, I can't say that it wasn't just a singular event that wasn't well managed. And for what it's worth, the slight facial weakness, occasional balance problems, and you see the slurred speech as well, is just a matter of part of that. But those things don't have anything to do with cognition, and taken together, those three things actually don't always show up in strokes that affect cognition either. There's whole spectrum, in the same way that the brain is this infinitely complex, like interdependent connections and systems. There is an infinite number of ways that that it can present when those connections break. They will present in syndromes with collections of symptoms, but that's always a very individual question, especially. So that's one scenario. And I think that that's on the table, quite frankly, right? I don't know for sure, but that's definitely on the table because, again, he's in the best possible position to have a positive outcome from this, right? The second one would be if this is not a sort of singular event, and this would be more of a chronic and ongoing problem. So something you could think of there is a Parkinsonian type syndrome, or like this is when you'd be talking about the dementias, those sort of scenarios. And so that too, and maybe I can touch on the third scenario I'd be thinking of. The third scenario would be an unstable cerebrovascular disease, right? So if the first one is stable, whereas you have a very well controlled risk factors, like what one of the things you always try to do is like what caused this person's stroke. If you can identify what's caused it, if you can atrial fibrillation, there are some other prominent politicians that have had a cardiac arrhythmia called atrial fibrillation that gave them a stroke. If you can give that person blood thinners, and you've effectively nullified that issue, right? But if you have somebody who has sort of critical narrowing of different vessels or something else in the brain, then you may be at a risk of a second stroke that would be a lot harder to prevent. And so this would be something where rather than maybe a steady decline or a stuttering decline you might see in dementia, it would be something where this person would just be at a much higher risk for a second stroke of some other kind. So that would be the sort of unstable cerebrovascular disease. Like where that leaves us here is quite frankly, the answers to these questions exist because the way that you would get an answer to that is by doing MRIs in the first instance, right? I mean, among other ones, right? So
we know he's had MRIs. That's something that's kind of
recently. Yeah. He also said that he he said he had MRIs as well as I believe cognitive tests in October. His trying to keep to things that either he has said or is publicly known. I think I'm doing pretty okay with that. And so the thing that an MRI can tell you, for instance, is if you have you don't have to do follow-up MRIs on every single stroke patient. It's not always totally useful, but there are occasions when you would. And if somebody is having follow-up deficits, apologies, if someone's having deficits flare up or waxing and waning, the way that you can distinguish between, is this a new stroke? Is this just what normal recovery looks like for this person? Or is this a harbinger of something else down the line? Is by doing advanced imaging, such as an MRI, to look for infarct, or by doing other cognitive assessments. Certainly, you can be a part of that. And so the answers to those questions, like where does all that leave us, are currently a Walter Reed. As far as I can tell, like that was one of the things that made me feel like this was cerebrovascular disease, is because it's kind of on the schedule for when you would want to follow up to know the answer to the exact questions you're asking George. And I'm sorry if that's unsatisfying.
No, it just means we need to go, it's heist planning time.
Well, you would know more about stealing medical records than me, Ed. I'll defer to you, but
You're not wrong.
I mean, I think that it was my understanding that last summer we all made the decision collectively as a society that it was worth talking about the neurological health of our president. And if that's the approach that we're going to take, then this is one of those times where, like, George, I think that you're asking a question that isn't a medical question. It's like a civil society question, right? I mean, I get super, super frustrated with folks on Blue Sky that just like take ageism a little too far. And I am also just spent a couple of minutes saying that just because you've had a stroke doesn't disqualify you from public office. But I am absolutely going to agree with you, George, that those questions are worth asking. Like, especially like, where does this go from here? Because this affects every single one of us.
Yeah.
And it's really striking to me how, when I've talked about this on Blue Sky or elsewhere, how many people have reached out to me and said, this reminds me of family. I've seen, I've heard this before. I've seen this before, and I've struggled and suffered with this before. I think it benefits all of us to talk about it.
The recent politics, and both the current president and the former one, and even the political valence in general aside, our society sucks at dealing with the concepts of death and aging. We're just really bad at it. We're really good at some stuff, like, if you look back through time, societies are good and bad at different things. our society is really, really bad at the concept of death and how we internalize that as people. And I think any society post Enlightenment is going to be at something of a leg down on this compared to ancient societies. But, you know, I don't have a tattoo. This is a frequent thing we've talked about on this podcast, is tattoos. And I don't have one, but if I was going to get one, I think the one I would get, which my wife won't let me get, but that's another story. It would be the Roman equivalent of rest in peace, right? Non fui, non sum, non curo. I was not, I was, I am not, I care not, right? That's sort of how I think about death. Like, it's just the lights going off, man. It's going to be okay. But man, most people don't think about death that way in our society, right? And so there's this general thing where we have a really hard time differentiating between a rational conversation about someone who is older and losing faculties and someone who isn't, right? There's no, it gets lumped into either all old people are on the edge of death and completely unable to function, or the opposite, where saying anything like that is horribly ageist. When in reality, if you've had aging parents or grandparents or great grandparents or aunts or uncles or whoever, then you know. I mean, my grandfather is still alive in his mid-90s and is extremely sharp. By any way of estimating it, extremely sharp. And we have sitting senators in their early 80s who frankly shouldn't be allowed behind the wheel of a car, let alone voting on major legislation. So it's hard to have these conversations in ways that are constructive and scientifically grounded, and also not carrying the massive cultural baggage that we do in this society.
I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, but we have multiple stroke survivors in the Senate, including at least 2 young stroke survivors. We've got, Fetterman, and also Ben Ray Lujan is a stroke survivor.
Just to be clear, when I refer to not driving a car, I'm talking about Fetterman, not just because of the stroke. Like, there's pretty good evidence here this guy shouldn't be driving a car.
I actually, it was funny. One of the first things I must have been like last year sometime, there was a conversation about Fetterman driving, and that was actually exactly the point I made. It's like, guy may be terrible at driving, it's not the stroke. That's the separate issue. I appreciate you saying that, all of that actually, because for a couple of things, like I'm the weirdo that has a book on death and life and American theology on my desk, because
oh hell yeah,
speaking of that, like loud dark machine grinding or whatever at the beginning, but I have tried really hard to, when I was describing what we've seen with the president, to actually kind of keep that purely in the like what you can observe. And I've tried to do that because of the way that people have reached out to me and expressed to me, I have seen this before, and I recognize this, and I want to know what this looks like, and I want to know that what this is. I've tried to keep politics out of it. I have my own opinions. You can find those online, I'm sure. I mean, I think it's important to be able to have these kinds of conversations, and I actually do very much think that Americans deal with death in a real weird ways. Paramedic for a real long time. We can do that as a different conversation too.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of kind of intertwined questions here, right? Like there's questions about mortality and aging, and there's questions about how we should treat actual physical brain damage and what should we expect from people in situations where we know that somebody's had either a traumatic brain injury or has had some cessation of function related to neurology. We're not good at talking about these things.
No, because they involve people's identities, right? Like, the experience that a lot of folks may have with it are at a very deeply personal level. It's not even an individual level; it's at a personal level. Like it's your loved one, right? It's your parents. My sister, who is an actual saint, is a social worker in neurology too, and she worked with Huntington's patients. Shepherding those folks, that's the type of thing that like you just can't talk about, really. And so I think that there's certainly that, and people have trouble knowing what to do. Like, how do you expand that out to like a government level? Like, how do you apply that lesson? And I don't know if this is correct, and I'd be really curious your thoughts, but after watching this year and last year too, I've become just a bigger fan of transparency when it comes to the president's medical records. And I don't love that personally, but I'd be curious your thoughts on it too.
I mean, yeah, I mean, like, of course, right? Like, you don't get to have privacy when you have that job. That's part of the deal, as
Right.
near as I can tell, right? Like, what are you supposed to do? You have to know that because he has the nuclear weapons. If you have launch authority on nuclear weapons, your medical records are public. I don't know how else you can do it in like a sane society, like a self-correcting one. I mean, all right, self-correcting. We have lived through the last 5 years, I know, but like,
Yeah, I was about to say, you're not talking about our society if you're using the term self-correcting.
I'm being hypothetical, George. But yeah, like, what are you? I said it twice, and I'll say it again. What are you supposed to do? You have to know.
I think it's tricky, particularly as we're running older and older people for president. That's been, from Reagan forward, that's really been kind of the rule. Not just people who got elected, but Bob Dole was old too, and there were questions about capacity. And with Reagan, there were questions about capacity, and particularly in his second term, maybe some pretty substantiated concerns about his continued ability to perform to the standards of the job. We wouldn't necessarily have known about that if we had more transparency in his medical records earlier, and it wouldn't necessarily have made a difference to the election. But it seems like something that people who are in contact with the president have to know, right? You have to be able to manage somebody who has any kind of, anytime you're managing a principal, you have to be aware of their limitations, and particularly their physical limitations, and you have to negotiate through that. If you're working with a principal who can't walk long distances or who gets tired very easily, you got to work around that. You need to design agendas such that they're not walking long distances, such that they are not being overstressed. And that's, some of that is it's almost sports medicine stuff, right? Like, you're trying to elicit good performance from somebody within the realm of their physicality, within the confines of their physicality. And if people who are working directly with the president know that, it seems like maybe the public should know that too when they make the decision to hire somebody for a presidential term. That said, we've seen how this becomes immediately and inevitably weaponized. We saw that with Biden. We saw it weaponized against Dole. We saw it at least attempted to be weaponized against Reagan. That even where these guys had their faculties in sufficient working order to do the job, there was more than a whiff of ageism about a lot of the allegations raised against any of our more geriatric presidents. And you don't like to see disclosure requirements become an occasion for a witch hunt, because you're going to find a witch. You're going to find some reason in somebody's thorough and transparent medicals to disqualify them.
I can sympathize with that a lot more than a president, though. Presidents get special rules. They have nukes.
Fair. But we also see that with like Supreme Court justices. Sotomayor, I think, has worked out fairly well from a jurisprudence standpoint. She's diabetic. Should that have been a reason not to nominate her? Maybe. Definitely, whatever calculation you're making about her life expectancy and therefore her tenure on the bench is going to be affected by her medical conditions. But at the same time, like, you don't really want to put yourself in a position of having to find somebody who is nimble of mind and pure of body.
I was going to say, at some point you just become a eugenicist. You've just reinvented eugenics.
Yeah, that's a way to throw out a lot of talent.
And that's why, it's the only thing that I don't know what the solution is to it. And I propped her with you saying that. I agree with that. That makes a lot of sense. I was thinking about it in the case of how, the previous, like, there was a storied history in the United States of the government keeping the president's health sort of at best, obfuscated from the public. Like Woodrow Wilson, I think, was of cerebrovascular fame, had his wife effectively running the government as far as like the short amount of stuff I've read on it to his last book. Do I think that far would be possible in today's day and age? No, that seems a lot harder And so maybe it's not as big of a threat now, but I don't know what to do with it either, actually.
I don't know. I think Melania would be up for it.
I'm afraid of her.
I mean, I guess if your concern is that we're in a gerontocracy, then creating the ability to weaponize medical records is probably a good thing to fix that, right? I mean, it's a lot easier to disqualify somebody with 80 or 65 years worth of medical records than it is to disqualify someone with my pristine simply because of shorter time frame length in my mid-30s, right?
Well, you could have everybody draw a clock at least. You know, I have for years. This is not a new thing. I have for years said that the only thing I think you should need to do to run for public office is sign your name and draw a clock. If you can do both of those things, I don't even really care what they look like. I just want to know. So a clock drawing test for those that are interested. It sounds simple, but it's asking your brain to actually do a couple of kind of complicated things at once, because you have to be able to plan out. So if I say draw a clock, like a manual clock with it's 11 past or it's 10 past 11 is a good one, because that way you have to have it like shaped in a certain way. You can actually tell a lot about the way somebody's thinking works by how they draw that clock, because they have to be able to organize in a couple of steps ahead. They have to think of the directions as a 10 past 11. So I have to think about the different numbers as they translate through and then actually put it into action. And so you can get all sorts of really interesting pathologies just from having folks draw a clock. And I know for a fact that several presidents have, and I would like access to those one day. But
it also means we will never have a Zoomer president. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just like
they have to draw a floppy disk drive.
The 90s kids have to draw a Casio watch.
If you can draw a calculator watch, you're fine. Yeah, that's.
This says AC. That is clearly wrong. Oh wait, whoops. I wrestle with it because like the answer to me very much feels like one of those things that is difficult but simple, right? Like. And like I think there's a certain amount of expectation around, or previously around, like people would very frequently, not always, but very frequently, like the norms were that you would quit before you got to the point where you could not do the job. And that has certainly not always been the case, obviously, but like I think you saw people retire and now you don't, in ways that is societally bad. If people aren't going to retire on their own, there is a certain amount of like, okay, then you have to prove it. And the clock drawing is a good one, but also like these people are capable of ending all life on Earth, or within enough of it to be concerning, right? Like, I feel like you should know what is going on in there to the best of your ability.
I mean, we give people driving tests to ensure they can still operate a car. I would think that with that in mind, having some sort of cognitive test before handing you nuclear weapons ought to be fair.
The obvious counterpoint to that is they still elected the fucking idiot. No one was surprised that like Donald Trump, I mean, he has been like this a lot longer than this term. Not to this extent, right? Obviously, like the physical symptoms that Haydon described are new, but he has very clearly not been all there for a while. Like, if you watch him, and I am carefully not looking at Haydon's screen because that is a non-medical observation, but they voted for him anyway. And at some point, there is a certain amount of you have to. If you're not going to bring back shame, I don't know what else you do other than find a mechanical solution. And I do realize that could be construed as a catapult, but you know.
Well, I was just going to say, I assume normal men is generally in favor of civic virtue, so that's.
We feel very strongly about.
Yeah, we are the chairs of the Civic Virtue Caucus.
The chairs of the Civic Virtue Caucus. What a lonely, lonely mountain to sit on.
There are 4 of us.
Yeah.
We exist.
We demand to be taken seriously.
We'll go like Hell Machine after you.
One issue I do want to raise, Haydon, is what are the chances that So let's say that Trump had a stroke. Does that, given what happened after he got COVID, is he now invincible?
Right. Yeah. So it's
Because he should have died 40 years ago.
There's an argument to be made.
Habits.
It's not a good one, but there's an argument to be made that the man's had a lot of near-death experiences, and maybe he should take something away from the fact he's gotten away from every single one.
That's fair.
I'm not prepared for a world where God is looking out for Donald Trump.
Unless we're going to reinvent Calvinism here too, I'm not sure I am either. But
Donald Trump the elect.
Oh God.
He is Presbyterian, or he was raised Presbyterian, by the way. I let that sink in a little bit. So,
wait, German Presbyterians?
No, Presbyterian Church of the United States of America.
But his dad was German, right?
But his mom was Scottish.
Oh, his mom. Okay.
Yeah, his mom was Scottish, so he's like, by law, he has to be Presbyterian.
That's how that works, right? But to answer your question, in maybe a little bit more of a serious way, is that if you've had one stroke, what are the odds of you having another one or having a more severe one down the road? Maybe like as a general question, right? And the answer is that if you've had one before, you're at a higher risk of having another one, just sort of if you look at the raw numbers of it. But this comes back to, again, being the most closely monitored individual on the planet, right? So a lot of for instance, my like more hands-on research like before I got into more like the higher level policy stuff was on emergency assessment and treatment of stroke. And the primary reason for that is because you will grow more neurons eventually. There is more increasing evidence that you do actually do that eventually, but it's extremely slow and slower as you get older. Every minute that you have an obstructed blood vessel in your brain from an ischemic stroke, for instance, there's a linear relationship with your both mortality and your morbidity, your disability rating afterwards. And so if you have had a previous stroke, you're at a higher risk of having another one. And if you were lucky enough to have been in a place where it was identified early that you got early treatment the first time, you better hope that you repeat that if it comes to it. Or else that your risk factors, your secondary risk factors, are managed as closely as possible to prevent it in the first place. So that's kind of why I really think that, especially for the office of the presidency, a minor stroke that's treated very, very quickly is very unlikely to be disqualifying, given just the sheer speed of which that happens, right? And I do mean it when it's like minutes, like you can do the math, like minutes for disability ratings too between treatment. So does that kind of answer your question, Litex?
Yeah, I think so. I'm just having this cursed idea in my head of Donald Trump getting this medical treatment and also like changing his diet to become one of those incredibly annoying vegan types or something like that.
He's going to be a fitness influencer tomorrow.
What about that other Bill? Is he a billionaire or is he just a weirdo? The guy out that's like trying to do all the different procedures to live forever. I mean, I know there's always somebody doing that.
Yeah, his son is his blood boy.
Yeah, Brian
That's
Johnson.
a sentence.
Did you have to say that?
I mean,
I realize
it's what's happening,
correct.
so I don't. I mean, like, come
I
on.
think we have to put George in timeout for saying that.
It is exactly what is happening. Why is everyone getting mad at me?
I'm pretty sure that the rule is that the more sort of self-censoring facts that you say out loud, the madder people get at you, George, and you know that.
Why are you booing me? I'm right.
I am absolutely right about this. I'm not endorsing it, for crying out loud.
I'll even ask. I will ask, actually. What's a blood boy?
No.
Okay. No.
Proctor.
Yeah.
Do your explanation thing.
Yeah. Proctor, please.
All right. So Brian Johnson regularly receives transfusions of fresh young blood. I mean, as many people do, apparently. This is something that has become, I don't know if fashionable is the right word, but it's on trend in certain circles.
That's why we had another kid recently.
Right. Yeah. You got to, lay in a store of replacement organs should you happen to need them later. It takes a while. It's a long supply chain. Anyway, Peter Thiel apparently also does this, but not with his children. He receives transfusions of young people's blood, and it's thought that this helps for various reasons. And I don't know about the medicine behind it or the science behind it. Brian Johnson gets transfusions from his teenage, maybe early 20s son. And that's one of the ways that he stays fresh and young looking. Now,
and he apparently compares their erections as well.
I was going to mention that. Yeah.
Yeah. He's very penis focused.
Well, I mean, he would be. I mean, that's underlying at least 45% of whatever this guy's behavior.
Oh, absolutely.
One thing that Brian Johnson has very recently gotten into, normally I run away from Brian Johnson news, except occasionally rubbernecking, but this I'm interested in, I'm invested in, is that he is taking what sound like fairly large doses of psilocybin, and an effort to see, what that does to him.
That explains a lot, to be honest.
I mean, for a guy who clearly has some issues around mortality, is Brian Johnson going to experience like ego death? Like, is he gonna?
Yeah, I mean, that can go two ways,
I listened to enough Sturgill Simpson to know where that goes.
Just remember, Haydon, you asked.
Apparently he's taking 5 grams of psilocybin. I don't know if that's a lot or if that's way too much, but if we have any listeners who know how much psilocybin.
That sounds like a lot to me. A lot.
I'm assuming this guy is not
600 pounds.
A frequent. That's a lot, I think.
I mean,
from working in emergency medical services in a college town, I mean, I'll say, yeah, that'll do it.
I hope you are off on your like SI prefixes here. Let's just put it that way. Cause that's a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, like I'm hoping that this is like 5 grams of mushrooms, right? Rather than 5 grams of, whatever purified essence.
If it's 5 grams of
psilocybin.
the actual chemical psilocybin, then he's that it can't be. There's just no way. If it's 5 grams of the mushrooms, that's still punchy. I mean, that's not nothing.
Yeah, he'd be a Grateful Dead fan if it were 5 grams of the psilocybin.
I will say, having grown up in a very bohemian town in the mountains where there was lots of wilderness around to farm this sort of thing, individual reactions may vary, and he might have the body chemistry to just take that down like a champ and keep trucking. But this stuff is not ibuprofen, and for some people, a reasonable dose may be a whole different planet for another person. So
this has been his entire shtick the entire time. This has been his master plan. Get to the point where you can get a big round number for whatever hallucinogen you want.
Yeah.
I mean, why else do you cycle out the blood like that? Why else do you need an oil change on a regular basis?
I did actually read the other day that apparently donating firefighters that donate their plasma can get these like PFAS, cancer-causing forever chemicals, out of their blood that way. Admittedly, that puts it then into the donor blood population, I guess.
But it's not in yours.
And but all I'm saying is like I've been taking up auto repair, and I wanted to both find a way to sort of synthesize that with my love of medicine. And Ed, we're almost there.
I will say, if you're getting a blood donation, if you need a unit or multiple units, then PFAS is not the thing that you need to worry about right now. There's something much more pressing that needs to be fixed before you have to worry about PFAS.
That's what I keep saying. So what if my colleague's blood comes out carbonated? You clearly need it.
You gotta get to tomorrow before you worry about forever chemicals, right? Like
that's right.
There's a strict sequencing issue here.
This might be our most horrifying episode ever. You're welcome.
Yep. People are going to yell at us for this one. Speaking of getting yelled at.
We haven't even gotten to the shutdown stuff yet.
Yeah.
I haven't looked at the news in like 58 minutes. So
do we need a recap? Do we
yeah.
need a recap?
Might help.
Okay. So there was late breaking news this afternoon into early evening that a group of moderate Democrats had agreed with the Republicans on a framework to end the government shutdown. We will get into the details of what they agreed to later. It has passed the Senate as of now, so we have the 8 Democrats that decided to jump out. Those names, for the record, are Cortez Masto of Nevada, Shaheen and Hassan of New Hampshire, Durbin of Illinois, Kane of Virginia, King of Maine, and Fetterman of Pennsylvania. So those are the senators that sided with the Republican Party to reopen the government. As far as the government will not be reopened, or is very unlikely to be reopened by the time you're hearing this episode, even though this vote has passed, because of a bunch of procedural stuff that really isn't important at this point. The key vote has passed. So very unlikely that we either don't get the government reopened or that it is reopened by the time you hear this. Probably Saturday, I think, is kind of the best case scenario for getting things reopened.
Yeah.
So
that's what I saw.
Yeah. So let's that's news. That's booked. Let's talk about what was in this deal and who voted for it and what that says about the politics of all this. And then we'll come on to, because of what's in the deal, this will probably happen again in relatively short order. So we'll save that treat for last. Hopefully this discussion runs less than 2 hours. Wish us luck.
No promises.
Propter, what was in the agreement?
Okay, so what did Dems get for the cave here? The answer is not a whole lot. I'm gonna make a case in favor of the cave later on that I'm not sure I 100% believe, but I think there's
he's been working on
case that it's possible to describe. But what Dems actually got for this is the deal is for a continuing resolution that runs through January 30th of next year. So it's approximately
2
months of CR funding for the government at fiscal year 2024 levels, because we're still working off fiscal year 2024 levels. That's what the CRs have pulled forward.
It's going to be 2024 for the rest of our lives.
Yeah. And like 2024 is not a bad base year if you're a Democrat, because that was a year that we had a Democratic president. So, we did have a Republican House of Representatives. So it's not like it's exclusively Democratic priorities, but it represents bipartisan negotiation rather than it being a Republican trifecta making the funding calls.
Just a brief interjection here. Also, just because spending is appropriated doesn't mean it actually happens. We will come back to that, but I just wanted to throw that out there as a bullet point.
Yeah, that's just like the apple of fucking discord you're throwing right in the middle of that conversation, but we will come back to that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I had to say it because otherwise I wanted to put a pin in it. We'll come back to it.
Yep. Okay, so we are getting a continuing resolution that runs through January 30th. A shorter CR is, in my opinion, and I think in the opinion of both Republicans and Democrats in Congress, something that advantages Democrats, because it means that we can go back and do this again in relatively short order. In addition to that CR, which includes some kind of minor true-ups, it includes some money for the widows of 3 dead congresspeople who are all Democratic. That's something that normally happens in appropriations bills, is that they pay out the rest of the year's salary that the congressman would have earned to their family. So a minor thing, but not a fully trivial thing either. There are some additional monies for U.S. Marshals for judicial security. I want to say that's about $30 million, so it's not a tremendous amount of money. It finally fixes the DC budget so that it reflects DC budget priorities and DC budget top lines for now, rather than cramming us back down to fiscal year 2024 levels. That's been something that should have happened back in March, but I'm glad that it's happening at some point.
That's a small thing nationally, but that's a genuinely good thing that comes out of this.
Yeah, we got screwed back in March on this, and it was there's no fiscal prudence argument for doing this. This is just Congress telling DC, no, screw you, you can't spend the money that you raised in taxes.
Yep.
It's not about them not funding us. It's about them giving us permission to run our budget the way we set up our budget. We're not spending other people's money here. We're spending our own. The so-called minibus is going to be attached to this. There are 3 areas that already had a House bill pass for appropriations, for full year appropriations. Those areas are military construction, veterans funding, and critically agriculture. I have not read the minibus. The Senate minibus is not the same as the House minibus. My understanding is that there are differences there. I did see that the hemp people are up in arms about some language there.
Good.
That they're saying is going to destroy the American hemp industry. I haven't read it, so I don't know if they're right or not, and I don't know if that's going to survive to the version that the Senate actually passes. And it would then, either way, it's going to need to go back through the House, get voted on there, and there's going to be a conference committee to iron out whatever differences there are. So it's not fully final language, no matter what it is. But those 3 areas are going to have full fiscal year appropriations. This is important because agriculture is where SNAP lives. So if the minibus passes, that means that SNAP has full year funding, regardless of whether or not there's an additional shutdown, regardless of whether or not the additional shutdown goes long enough that we're in the situation we're in right now, where SNAP has no money or has less money than it would if it had actual appropriations, and people start missing SNAP payments. That part, in my view, is an unambiguously good thing. There are some things where you can skip sending the check for a month and it's painful, but not that big a deal. And there are other things where if you skip sending the check for a month, it's a real big problem. SNAP is one of the latter category. This is. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic here, but like we were literally going to starve some people in the United States of America. I don't know exactly how many people we were going to starve, but we were going to starve some people.
Enough, right? Like enough people were going to starve.
This prevents that, and also it means that in a future shutdown, that's not a rail that's going to get touched. At least not if the future shutdown takes place in fiscal year 2026. So I think that those things are valuable to a greater or lesser extent. How much I like the minibus, again, there hasn't really been time for me or anybody else to fully evaluate the minibus. So my opinion might change a little bit on that.
The basic read on the minibus seems to be that it's not great, but could be a lot worse given who's writing it.
Yeah, I mean, this is fully Republican trifecta government. So, but the one thing we know it does is it protects SNAP to whatever level they're protecting SNAP. We also got a promise from Republicans in Congress, from John Thune, that there will be a vote on whatever version of ACA subsidy language Democrats want at, I believe there's a date certain that they agreed on in December, or maybe Dems get to pick the date certain. I'm not sure what it is. There's been some reasonable criticism of this, that it's a promise, it's empty, nothing's going to come of it, they're not going to vote for it anyway. There's something to that, but I'm not sure there's as much to that as I think people are valuing that at 0, and I think it should be valued at more than 0. It shouldn't be valued at a lot, but it should be valued at more than 0. Republicans from a number of parts of the party have been making cave noises themselves about the ACA subsidies. This is a political football, and it is going to be politically painful for Republicans to not do anything about the ACA subsidy extension.
I will say it is much harder to manage the Republican caucus in the House with that vote live in the Senate than it is with we passed a CR and we're just keeping things closed. Like Mike Johnson having to return to regular order in the House is going to create some problems for him. And there are other places as well. For instance, swearing in the last signature needed for the discharge petition on the Epstein files. But there's other, the healthcare stuff as well. It's relatively easy to just say the government's shut down, so we're shut down too, which is essentially what he said for the past month and a half. Whereas actually having the caucus in to vote on stuff, it makes the healthcare question a lot harder to defend, and other questions as well, as I said. Oh God.
And George just died, so we'll miss him. But so
Cramping.
this really is our worst episode ever.
I gotta go get some electrolytes. I'll be back.
We gotta leave that in. I hear you, Proctor. I get what you're saying. And this is where I preface it with, I am not a in-depth politics knower, but I know an asshole. And they're all assholes. Why would we trust them in the slightest on any of this? Like you're saying, it's not zero. I struggle to see why.
Because I think Republicans are looking for a way to cave on ACA subsidies.
Sure, but it's Trump.
Yes. I mean,
you think so?
The Wall Street Journal article that had people up in arms today is this Wall Street Journal article about how the thing that broke the logjam is this idea to do ACA subsidies as some kind of HSA contribution. The devil is very much in the details there.
Yeah, like I've never used mine. Right?
Right. Look, I mean, if what they're saying is we're going to give you an amount equal to the subsidies and it's going to go in HSAs and HSAs are otherwise going to work just like they always have, then that sucks. It's not useful. If they're saying that they're going to change HSAs and FSAs so that those can be used to pay insurance premiums, and anyone who's going to be eligible for the ACA subsidies gets the exact same dollar amount as they would have otherwise, then for that, I'm listening.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
You know, the basic Republican problem on the ACA subsidies is that even if you assume arguendo, and I understand that that's not a slam dunk case, but even if you assume arguendo that they'd like to do them, they can't do them as just straight up ACA subsidies. They can't prop up Obamacare that they've been arguing against for the last 15 years now, 16 years.
Forever.
And that Trump has been very publicly arguing against. They can't just walk backwards on that politically. So there has to be some kind of decoupling where you provide what is, in the best possible spin case, a fig leaf for Republicans to say, okay, this thing that we like now, it's totally different than that thing that we spent a long time arguing against.
They do like doing that. So like, I'll give you that.
They have a very real political problem with the ACA subsidies, which is that people are going to notice that they are paying a lot more for their insurance. People are going to drop insurance. You've got all these second order effects. You've got potential death spirals for insurance companies as a result of the drop of ACA subsidies that we've talked about some previously on this show that I think are real concerns. But directly for Republicans, the immediate instant concern is some people are going to see their insurance premiums quadruple and they're going to lose their shit. So, if you don't think Republicans were ever going to be on board with any ACA subsidy extension, then this looks like a pretty cold comfort. If you think that Republicans want to get to a deal there, and I'm doing some tea leaf reading here and maybe some wish casting, then I don't think we've heard the last of ACA subsidies. I don't think this closes the book on that. And I mean, like I've been saying for a while that I thought that the resolution on ACA subsidies was largely independent of the resolution on the shutdown, because the mechanics of the shutdown were such that we weren't going to get a trade where ACA subsidies happened in exchange for a full year bipartisan negotiated appropriations, because they weren't negotiating. And we were never, ever, ever going to get whatever it is, $500 billion of ACA subsidies for a 11-week continuing resolution.
Sure.
I mean, getting a vote on it, at least you're making them wear it.
Yes.
You're getting a vote directly on the ACA subsidies. And if they pass it, great. And if they don't, okay. Well, we just had a vote on this specific issue and y'all voted it down.
Yep. And I also think there's something to the idea that it doesn't matter. Trump is president and my insurance premiums are going up 1,000%. I don't care what the mechanics are in Congress. I'm pissed. Right.
Right.
Which is why when this whole shutdown fight kicked off, it was it sort of seemed to me to be asymmetric, where it's, if Dems win and get this policy win, that's great. But also, if they lose, then Republicans are the ones that control government, control the White House, and have to wear this massive increase in premiums on top of all the other unpopular stuff that's going on. So, as these things go, this isn't the worst outcome.
No,
I do
but
think it is really strange to have done this whole fight and just to get to this point. I think this deal would have been available a long time ago, but that's not how the dynamics of the caucus worked out.
I mean, let's look at what we pocketed on this. I think there is general consensus at this point that the shutdown was helpful to Democrats in last Tuesday's elections. That's, insofar as we're approaching this from a crassly political perspective, that's money in the bank. We got that out of this. We got a partisan political advantage in a relevant election. So that's one reason why I think the timing kind of makes sense. I missed saying this earlier. This is not a huge thing, but it's not nothing either. We also got RIF, reduction in force protection, that is retroactive to the start of October, that runs through the end of January. So we're saving some federal jobs there from RIF processes that were started that were probably illegal, but this makes them, it makes it harder to
extra
press
super
the case.
duper illegal.
Yeah.
Super double secret illegal.
So that's one of the things, though, right? Like, the reason I am particularly unhappy about this is because this doesn't actually touch that Republicans refuse to execute their duties under Article 1, right? Like, and I'm not saying you are going to be able to get them to do that, but you have to get them to they need to be the ones to burn it down.
I did have a question about that, and this may be galaxy brained to a fault.
Nothing is here. It's fine.
I will get us there. I'm working on it. So, Proctor, I was wondering, because to me it seemed like one of the main issues that Thune had throughout these negotiations is that not only does he have very little credibility, he has no ability to speak for either Johnson or the president. And so,
yeah.
And not only that, like, just every other thing that has been, that he's done, like, there's no credibility there. Would it be totally unreasonable for me to say that them not caving on the filibuster for this was a confidence building measure, and that meaningfully made it so Democrats would be willing to negotiate on some of this stuff, and that's part of what led the timing to now? Because otherwise, like, there has to be some confidence building here, right? I guess not. Maybe not. I don't know.
Well, I mean, Democrats demonstrated proof of concept here in that they held together the longest shutdown ever under conditions where they were doing it through a filibuster. That's not normally how shutdowns happen. In fact, I think this is only the third shutdown that's ever happened under trifecta government, where it's happening because the minority party is filibustering in the Senate. And the other two were also Democratic shutdowns under Trump. So this is rare. Usually when we have government shutdowns, it's because there's a split in government between either between the houses of Congress or between the White House and Congress. And you have majority institutions that are not able to come to terms. This is unusual in that the majority all wants government to be open. So Democrats have successfully held a long shutdown under what I think are pretty adverse conditions for doing so. So in that sense, they didn't cave, but also the Republican caucus in the Senate could have, and in my opinion, as a matter of political gamesmanship, should have immediately nuked the filibuster for clean continuing resolutions. They should have immediately changed it so that you can pass a clean CR that is defined under the rules by a majority vote without needing to go through the cloture process. They didn't do that. And in fact, they've been very resistant to Trump's repeated calls to nuke. That's kind of a good sign in terms of independence from the White House. And it's, I think, relevant to note that Mike Johnson also came out against nuking the filibuster. So that was a position that I don't think he really had to take, and it's a position that puts him directly in conflict with Donald Trump. So that was not a fully riskless position by him, which is unusual because normally...
Yeah, he's a toady. We know. But so the reason I mentioned like the failure to do anything about like with Article 1 duties is because like, yeah, sure. This RIF Act says you can't fire people before February 1st. What is stopping Russell Vogt from saying, fuck you, make me? And the answer, I'm pretty sure, from any Republican in existence is nothing. Like, yes, we'll do another lawsuit about it, right?
But the White House has also co-signed this agreement. They've come out, they've endorsed it, they've said this is a good deal. They like this deal. So to some extent, what you're seeing here is an agreement, the Senate and the administration, that not only are they not going to follow through on the previous RIFs they did, they're not going to do any more RIFs through January. Remains to be seen if they're going to keep their implicit word on that, or I assume at some point this was their explicit word. My understanding is that they negotiated back from this being an indefinite bar on RIFs through all of fiscal year 2026 to it just running through the end of January, which is when the CR ends. So it's kind of self-enforcing in that way. And I would expect an additional ban on RIFs to be part of the next shutdown negotiations also. Frankly, I think that's why Tim Kaine got on side, that the RIF protection is a big deal for the senator from Virginia, especially if it's something that can be extended if we roll CRs. And it's something that the administration abides by. That addresses a significant concern that Democratic constituencies had.
Big ifs, two very big ifs. There's nothing in this deal preventing Trump from just restarting the RIF process the exact same way he has as soon as this deal expires on January 31st or January 30th? January 31st.
I mean, or before that, like who enforces?
I mean, I will give the language of the text. I mean, it's strong language. There's no legal maneuvering you can do with this language. It's pretty explicit.
No, I get that. I looked at it.
But I mean, even leaving that aside, right? It is explicitly, if this had been an extension for a year or something like that, like had the same language for a year, I would feel totally differently about this, right? But that is not what it is. It's as soon as if there is a rerun of this all in January, right? Or at the end of January, beginning of February, then same thing happens and we're back in the exact same spot with federal employees with the RIFs. So I don't know. I just don't see it as that big of a win.
The thing for me is that this isn't this is illegal.
So the thing about the RIFs there is that they're illegal to do during a period of government shutdown, right? But this covers more than the period of government shutdown. This covers the period of government not shutdown that the CR is creating.
Sure, but they still broke what I am led to believe are laws.
And that was being litigated, and I think they eventually would have lost.
I agree.
But it created significant disruption. But in addition to that, we're getting legal protection against RIFs from a period that was not previously legally protected against RIFs.
Sure, I get that. But there's the fascinating concept of accountability that I don't know that you can negotiate with people who refuse to do their jobs. Because this is still them.
There's some currency to that, but that's part of why it's a short-term CR.
Yeah.
That the leverage that we have now, at least in terms of not funding the government through the filibuster, we're going to have that same leverage at the end of January.
Yeah, that's true.
You could actually argue that leverage will be stronger at the end of January because there won't be a national holiday involving lots of travel over the forthcoming couple of months. And that appears to have been really the thing that forced the group of 8 moderate Dems to cave on this, right?
And Snap, right? Snap. Snap will also be taken off the table.
Oh yeah, sure. Yes. Sorry, that's fair. So that's two things that appear to have been, at least at some margin, binding constraints on Dems that won't be 3 months from now. So, you can make the case that this actually isn't that bad of an outcome, and I think I'm amenable to that. I really would like to talk about some of the caucus dynamics though, because I think they're interesting. leadership, with the exception of Durbin, who's retiring, so Schatz and Schumer being the two primary figures here, voted against this package. And if you look at all the senators who voted for it, none are up in 2026 and none have a foreseeable path to a national profile, which is something that was pointed out by my friend Connor Sen on Blue Sky a little while ago. It's very obvious that the rising stars in the Senate, such as they are, and also the people who are up for primaries next year, are not interested in taking this vote on the yes side. And I think that reflects a very obvious understanding of where Democratic primary voters are right now. And obviously some horse trading got done behind the scenes, but this was not Democrats across the board saying we don't want to continue the shutdown. This was a specific couple of people, and then some horse trading got done, I think. And the fact that they had to do that horse trading is good evidence that, once again, we're coming up against a structural issue in how the Senate is designed, as opposed to a issue where the party is somehow responsible for wanting Republicans to win. It's still a problem, don't get me wrong, but there was just not that much daylight to whip these votes into line. I mean, what are you going to do to Dick Durbin? Like, what is Chuck Schumer supposed to do to Dick Durbin? The guy's retiring next year and it's lights out. And two of the other yes votes are retiring as well. Like, you can't do anything to these people.
Well, so Angus King is bulletproof for lots of reasons. I mean, the guys who were a yes on this all along, who were Fetterman, King, and was it Cortez Masto? Who was the third? Who was yes all along?
Cortez Masto, yeah.
So
and I mean, Cortez Masto barely snuck into, but whatever. Yeah. Sorry.
You sort of have three categories, I think, of senators, of Democratic senators who broke ranks on this. You have the senators in narrow reddening states. That's the two senators from Nevada and the two senators from New Hampshire, who have reasons that I think are wrong. I think they're misevaluating. But they have electoral calculations that they're making that I think are sincerely held. And like, if you look at the senators from Nevada, in each of their last two elections combined, if you take all the votes they won by and put them together, I want to say it's like maybe in those four elections total, they won by a total of 150K votes, something like that. They have been hanging on by their fingernails. So it's hard for me to fault them too much for wanting to project moderation and wanting to avoid taking risks that might rebound on incumbents.
They will be lucky if this is seen as moderation.
Well, I mean, what I'm saying is they see it as moderation.
Like, the Democrats are mad. Even, that's fair.
Yeah.
For Cortez Masto and Jackie Rosen in particular, this has been very clearly a conscious thing, that's the lane they've decided to go for. They represent a weird state. So I don't know that I'm in a position to second guess their analysis of these electorates that they keep winning by extremely narrow margins. That's probably the tightest state in the country right now, and it probably has been for the last three cycles, and it probably will be for the next two.
I think it's going to be a lot. I mean, they're not up in 26, but I think 26 would not be particularly close to Nevada, but that's another question. It's not relevant to this.
That's probably true. We'll see. There's a gubernatorial election in 2026, so we're going to get a statewide. Anyway.
Yeah.
We'll be able to kind of take the temperature on that. I believe that last gubernatorial election was won by on the order of 8,000 votes. So it's razor close there, and it has been for years. You've got
it's definitely a structurally close state. I just don't. Yeah, sorry. Well, I'll stop.
You've got the This Is Stupid caucus, which I think is basically Fetterman and King, who just think that this whole shutdown thing is a moronic thing to have done. I'm not entirely unsympathetic to that, despite the fact that one of its proponents is Fetterman.
That was Proctor Malone on Blue Sky.
Proctor Malone.
Look, the theory of victory on this all the way through was a pretty thin path, right? Like, one of the big reasons we were pressing the shutdown button was because we really, really, really wanted to press a button. And this was the button we had. And It's not a very good button to solve the problems that we want it to solve, which is that we want Donald Trump to not be president. But it's the button that we had, so we pressed it. And the theory of victory here, where we get the ACA subsidies directly out of this negotiation, I thought it was clear for a while that that was not going to happen. I thought that we might have gotten Republicans to nuke the filibuster, which is one of those careful what you wish for things out of it. You know, that's something that might have felt like a win in the short term and might have felt terrible in the long term. We got some electoral help in the New Jersey and Virginia elections, and I think that was, frankly, kind of an unexpected bonus. It's not nothing. I think we picked the ACA ask basically because that was an ask that could keep the caucus together. And the most important thing for the shutdown was our ability to keep the caucus on side. Like, I think if we'd done this on ice, we probably would have ended the shutdown weeks ago because we would have gotten guys peeled off. That's not a satisfying answer to anybody, but I think it's true.
That's 100% true.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Also, we should talk about the dynamics with the House, right?
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Do we have a House of Representatives? Are they still...
Are they alive?
Yeah, so they are. And one of them had some funny stuff to say. So Sean Casten, who is, I think it's Casten, not Casten. Either way.
So. Yeah.
Illinois 6th.
He's on Blue Sky. He'll deal with it.
Yep. Super interesting guy. Used to run a clean energy company and is probably the single best informed person in the federal government. And I do mean in the federal government. I don't mean in Congress. The single best informed person in the federal government on energy policy, and especially like the grid and grid policy, like electrical policy. Super interesting guy. I don't agree with all his stuff, but I'm just going to read a couple posts because this guy is pissed. Okay, so going in before it was clear that there were going to be enough moderate votes in the Senate to cave. He said, I don't know what the Senate is going to do, but if they do in fact fold in exchange for nothing, they will be living up past performance. To expect the Senate to carry out the will of the American people is to misunderstand why it was created in the first place. Okay. Post number 2, to be clear, D senators trusting our senators who promise a vote on ACA subsidies at some future point is nothing more than a liar convincing a sucker for believing the lie and for believing that Johnson will ever bring it up in the House. He's pissed. And this is not a squad guy, right? Like, this is not some wild-eyed progressive radical left wing, whatever. He's a former CEO. And he's literally like, burn down the Senate. So, I don't know how much it's going to impact the outcome of the next shutdown, etc. But I will say that Senate Democrats have a lot of work to do to get the House Democrats on side. And every indication we have is that House Democrats are going to be the ones calling the shots in the lower house as of about a year from now. And I don't know. Schumer better start taking some IOUs or doling out some IOUs, because twice now they have hung out the House to dry on government funding stuff.
Well, this one is I don't think you can say this one's on Schumer.
No. I'm not. Sorry. Let me clarify what I mean. What I mean is Schumer is the leadership in the Senate. I don't mean this one's on him. I mean the Senate Democrats as a group are making life very hard for House Democrats, and someone needs to organize a path to them getting onto the same page. And one way they can do that is Senate leadership doing things as favors to House Democrats in some way. I didn't mean to say that this is all on Schumer, and I actually quite frankly believe very much the opposite. But
yeah, I mean, like, the DNC has actually just come out. I don't know if you saw this, but like Ken Martin just issued a statement like half an hour ago being like, no, this is, we do not like this. We stand with Senate leadership who is not voting for this. And
with the exception of Durbin, but he's in Senate leadership, man.
You're not wrong.
Could you explain that to me? Is that an indicator that Durbin is retiring and doesn't care about anybody, or is that an indicator?
I mean, Durbin is retiring.
Well, no, I understand that, but okay, more specifically, is it an indicator he just doesn't care anymore, or is it an indicator that there's actually more acquiescence at the leadership level in the Senate? I'm trying to figure out how to actually read that caucus dynamic.
Did we get a final number on the vote count?
I don't think it's done yet.
It's not done yet because Mike Lee is causing a ruckus in the Senate. So technically, I guess, as a note to users or listeners, it's possible that this whole episode, it blows up in our face because the Republican caucus in the Senate goes insane. But, because they haven't actually technically passed it yet, but they're going to. So the 8 that we have that defected from the party line were Shaheen in New Hampshire, Hassan in New Hampshire, Fetterman in Pennsylvania, Kane in Virginia, Durbin in Illinois, Cortez Masto in Nevada, Rosen in Nevada, and King in Maine. And again, just to reiterate, for all intents and purposes, King is someone it's very hard to pressure. I mean, there's just no real way for Democrats to pressure King on this, other than shaming him. I mean, that's it.
He's not going to run again.
Well, he's not up until 2030.
Yeah, I know.
So it's irrelevant. Shaheen, Hassan, Cortez Masto, and Rosen, as we discussed, small margins of victory. They have a theory of the case.
Well, Shaheen's retiring too, isn't?
Shaheen is retiring.
Shaheen is retiring, but again,
she could be trying to salvage. I get what you mean.
So then you're left, the ones you're left with that could hypothetically have been leadership making it easier for swing state Democrats who wanted to vote yes, but didn't want to take a long-term career hit. The cover for them would be Kane or Durbin.
Yeah.
Fetterman was going to do what Fetterman was going to do. So, you're looking at most 2 possible plants from leadership in this list, in my opinion. And we don't know if they were plants from leadership or if they just were doing this because they were doing this. I think you could make the case that in both directions for both of these guys.
One moment of wild ass speculation on that. I would guess that Durbin is a yes so that Warner could be a no. And I'm not sure that that's a leadership position. I think that's a Durbin Warner thing.
Yeah, because Warner is up in 26, right?
Yep. And he does not want to draw a primary challenger. But also he needed this shutdown to be over. I think Warner, maybe more than anybody, is somebody who was a vulnerable Dem incumbent on the issue of the shutdown. And I don't even know if he's going to have a credible Republican challenger. Maybe Youngkin takes a shot at him. Youngkin's still bizarrely popular.
Yeah. Virginia Republicans and credibility, not exactly 2 words that walk hand in hand these days, or 3 words, I guess.
Never thought we'd get the former capital of the Confederacy in the national divorce.
But
we sure did.
There's a lot of feds who live in Virginia, and the shutdown is hurting feds. Whatever else it's doing, there's real pain it's causing to people who have mortgages to pay and contractors.
Yep.
And Warner was the one I was thinking about with that too. Once Kane makes sense because he's got a little bit of time, but that makes sense. I appreciate going.
Yeah, I mean, if nothing else, Mark Warner's got to keep Blue Sky's own Jamel Bowie off his ass. So,
yeah, I was going to say, our dear leader Jamel Bowie will probably take a personal revolution against Mark.
Look, I am a moderate on this issue. I want us to give Jamel Bowie a Gundam.
I didn't realize that you were so conservative, George.
there was an extra syllable in there, and I'll allow it.
But yeah, I think that's what's up with Durbin. It doesn't really make any sense for him otherwise, but I haven't seen a statement from him on it either. So maybe he's got reasons that he'll attempt to express.
I do think it's very noteworthy, for all the milieu on Blue Sky and in other places blaming leadership, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. At some level, there is a reason that nobody with a near-term political future was on this list of no's. Right? These are creatures who are going to serve out the rest of their career in the Senate. They don't have a path to national leadership at this point, or to the presidency or another higher office. There's a really good reason for that. There's a reason that Ruben Gallego in Arizona Gallego in Arizona didn't vote for it. There's a reason that John Ossoff didn't. There's a reason that Tammy Duckworth didn't. The list goes on. They know what the tone is. And again, the only reason that we got the outcome we did is because of the structure and design of the Senate. It's not, if everyone was up every 2 years, like in the House, I get it. That's not what the Senate's supposed to be like. I understand. Thank you. Yes. I've read enough Federalist Papers. I understand.
Yeah, they were wrong. It's fine.
But if they were up every 2 years in the House, this looks completely different. A lot of stuff our society would at that point, but it looks completely different. Should we just quickly, we didn't have a full recap of the Tuesday elections in our last episode, did we? Because of the timing?
No, we did that. We did that before the elections, last week's episode. Yeah. So we did not know the outcome
before
of the elections.
The Spamberger Revolution of Dignity.
Exactly. Thank you, Hayden.
Boy.
So let's just quickly each do like a quick spiel of what we thought and main takeaways, and we can cut it off there. I for myself, the thing that I think most stood out and that I am most interested in is the very obvious swing in low propensity and especially Latino voters. Like that to me is the big thing. We knew that Democrats would have a more engaged base. We knew that Republicans would have depressed turnout. That isn't a surprise. But when you're talking about 60-point swings for 82% Latino geographies, if that is replicated by a third in Texas, Texas is blue.
Yeah.
And also here for my state, I, for one, look very much forward to Senator Roy Cooper. So that's my take on it.
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine that there's anybody who listens to this podcast who hasn't looked at the election results, but the short answer is that Democrats won everything everywhere. Everything that was plausibly going to go blue went blue, and some things that were not really plausibly going to go blue went blue. Have we actually gotten a final count on the Virginia House of Delegates? Do we know whether they got that reach seat?
I was 64, I think, but then there's one other one that is there's still some that a 5 or 10% chance it might go to Dems, but 64 is the last one I checked.
Yeah, so I mean 64. That's a 13-seat swing from the status quo ante. That's the largest majority Virginia that Democrats have had in Virginia certainly since I've been alive. This is a big deal.
So you're telling me they're going to legalize hunting Republicans for sport?
I mean, maybe once Spanberger takes office.
I have several pieces of paper that say University of Virginia behind me, and I happen to know that Doug Jones and Abigail Spanberger do too. And I am also extremely confident about their plans for reforming the Board of Visitors, I think. So that's...
Oh, good.
We shall see.
Yeah. It's going to be good to have that one back to have that governor's mansion back in Democratic hands. And I think I'm not the only person to make this observation, but Virginia Senate Republicans were very lucky that they were not on the ballot this cycle. They would have gotten blown out too. The Jersey margins were way bigger than we thought they were going to be. They were way bigger than the polls said they were going to be. It'll be interesting to see what kind of soul-searching pollsters do about that.
Spoiler, none.
Yeah.
Misses in the D direction don't get big postmortems, man.
Yeah, I mean, I said that the governor race would be won by 2 because of New Jerseyans, and to their credit, they surpassed my minimal expectations.
Yeah, the margin came out at what, 13, 14?
Yeah, something like that.
I do think that's good evidence of the low propensity voter. I mean, not Latino necessarily in New Jersey. It doesn't have that big of a Latino population, but the low propensity voters being like, no, sir. And again, if that just...
They have to keep showing up, though.
They do, but look, the 2024 election result was interpreted by so many people, not anyone here, but so many people as a mandate for a specific way of running the country in truly dramatic scale and breadth. And that is not what that election result was. We've talked about this.
Yeah.
People were pissed about inflation. We have a very ideologically divided country with a very narrow window of people to convince. And the people you can convince all said, we hate inflation. And look, that was a bad call on their part, but what are you going to do? In the global context, that narrative I think is very obvious, and every piece of evidence we got from Tuesday is that people are not liking the results. So they got to show up. You're right, Ed, but man, at the kind of margins we saw on Tuesday, not that many have to. So
part of me knows you're right. The other part is still tallying up how expensive this is going to be to fix. So that may be informing some of my grimness.
It doesn't solve anything, right? Like
nothing George said made me feel better. What are you talking about?
Yeah, no. What are you even here for?
We're talking about a read through to the next election, and that's it. As far as fixing everything goes, I mean, I think the results that we saw in the Senate this evening are indicative of a Senate caucus that has no interest in overturning the filibuster. And as long as the filibuster is in place, no fundamental reform is going to take place in this country. So,
yep,
we're still screwed there. That said, I will say, your prior now, or where you are now, if you're updating your priors, you should be a lot more enthusiastic about the idea of Democrats winning the Senate than you were prior to that election. Winning solves a lot of issues. Haydon, thanks for joining us tonight, man. We really appreciated your insights on the president.
Yeah, thanks for coming by.
God, I really appreciate y'all having me.
We lost dearly departed low tax forever. No, just for during recording, he had to jump off. So you're not going to hear him to sign off tonight. But for normal men in Charlotte, I'm George.
In DC, I'm Proctor.
From Boston, I'm Ed.
Stay normal, y'all.